These are actual images that Jeremy sent me. And you can see there, this is something that he does frequently. A UFO landing filmed on video, brought forward by Michael Battista and Ross Coulthart. Some in-depth analysis and video on who George Knapp claims is a CIA Legacy UFO gatekeeper. The new technology that was just released within the last 24 hours of Skunkworks that they've been teasing out. President Trump now claiming NASA and putting in an executive order that NASA is a spy agency. Interesting week in the UFO world, y'all. Stay tuned for that and more coming up. All right, y'all. We are going to get started off here. Don't forget, like and subscribe to the channel. Got to get that in before we get going. We're going to start off with this release from Skunkworks, Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin has been teasing this for a while. If you've been following Lockheed Martin Skunkworks, you know that their stock has been a topic of discussion for shareholders recently, and they've been kind of operating in the negative as they have been producing, this so-called brand new technology that they believe is going to be a game changer in the field of warfare. Now, last night, in the middle of the night, very strange, they released their premiere video of this technology. It's a very short video, but we're going to check it out here. This is the Lockheed Martin brand new, I guess it's a drone, but it appears to be more than that. It appears to be a drone that is kind of in addition to and add-on to a fighter jet. Let's take a look. Boy, that was very brief. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the volume here. It looks like what we have is the Vectis survivable CCA. So looks like multiple drones that can target things downrange, and we've got direct control from the fighter pilot here. Looks like you can tell him to go ahead and engage. So kind of cool. I mean, it's kind of like having it's kind of like having extra wingmen around you, right? So it's almost like a video game at this point. Instead of extra weapons on your actual jet, they're going to be other jets, drone aircraft that are going to be kind of an extension of your fighter aircraft that I'm guessing are using, a very probably advanced AI type of technology. It would have to be very cutting edge, very fast technology to be able to operate in that space. Because lives are on the line there. If you're talking about engaging and fighting in war, if you're going to depend on a drone that you don't necessarily have direct control of, it looks like you can tell, it was a very short video. It looks like you can interact with the drones, tell them what you need to engage, but primarily it looks like they're doing a lot of the flying on their own. It doesn't look like the typical, for instance, Reaper drone that we've seen, that it's going to have an operator or two controlling and manning the actual drone. These look like they're going to be operated primarily by AI, I would imagine. So very interesting tech. I think it's a brief video, but they can't show too much, right? I mean, they've got to maintain their secrecy, and they don't want to put out there too much of what the thing is capable of, I would imagine, at least not at this stage. But wow, it looks scary. It looks dangerous, right? Who knows how many weapons you can load those things up with. That will be interesting to see what kinds of weapons, how many can be loaded onto it, what the payload is. Those will all be very, very interesting. It'll be interesting to hear what actual fighter pilots have to say about the technology once they've messed around with it a little bit. So we've got this new headline here. This is stealing some headlines that Trump put an executive order out. I'm not a fan of executive orders, but Trump put an executive order out that basically declared that NASA is now a spy agency. And boy, you have got some folks really irritated with this because they believe this is a pivot away from science and a pivot towards more spying, more intel, counterintelligence, intelligence gathering, whatever you want to call it. But there are people that are concerned. To me, as far as the actual using of their equipment, satellites, cameras, things of that nature, I imagine that's been going on forever. Like, I don't think that that's been some line that we won't cross if we really need to know information. I think if we need to know information and NASA can help intelligence gather information on a certain objective or certain mission, that they're 100% going to do that. If not above, legitimately, then behind closed doors. But either way, same team, they'll make sure they get that information if it's needed, I think. I don't think this is about, and I'm not alone in this, this is actually some research I've done, this isn't really about NASA becoming spies and using all their stuff to spy on people. That's not what this is about. What this is about really is kind of union busting. By doing this, by turning the organization and putting them under the umbrella of a spy agency, you basically weaken the ability for NASA and their employees to participate in any kind of collective bargaining agreement. Reporting on this, we can see that, let me go ahead and make this full screen, that basically what's going on here is Trump's labor union EO designates NASA as primarily an intelligence national security agency. What's happening is the executive order issued by President Trump to exclude NASA and other agencies from collective bargaining rights does so by designating them as having intelligence or national security as a primary function. This is quite a departure from NASA's historical status as the nation's premier civil space agency. Apart from the executive order's effect on the approximately 50% of NASA workers now represented by unions, what impact, if any, it will have on how NASA is viewed domestically and internationally remains to be seen. So what we have here is not about being spies or not being spies. It's about the government being able to pay less for services rendered by their employees, the government putting themselves in a more powerful position when it comes to negotiating salaries. And once again, we have yet another union that has been pretty much crippled at this point. Over 50% of the employees are now going to lose the ability to participate in any kind of CBA. That's what this is about. So it's not about NASA becoming spies. It's about the government wanting to limit how much they're going to pay their employees. And from a bottom line, black and white taxpayer perspective, you think, oh, that's cool. So we're not going to have to pay more than what we need to pay. But what that can do is cause what's known as brain drain. If you have a ceiling on how far you can go with your employer, for some employees, that's going to really dampen your motivation for productivity and innovation. That's where the brain drain comes from, right? So if you know you can't get a certain amount of money for a certain type of innovation, what's the purpose in trying harder? That's been a complaint about government employees forever, right? If we walk into a DMV office, it's like, oh my gosh, here we go. Nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to be in a hurry. And that's because it doesn't matter. They don't really have a bonus that they get if they process so many licenses that week. So there's no economical motivation there. And economical motivation isn't always what it's about, but it is what it's about for a lot of folks. And so that will cause less people to go into that venue because they know there's a ceiling there as far as their financial gain. Brain drain, right? They're going to go into private industry. We've already seen this happen. We have some of our most brilliant people speckled throughout all these different agencies, private industry agencies, because there's no point in them working with certain government agencies in their priorities. It's just not that important to them to get paid less and work for the government. I get it. So enough on that. We all can see it that basically it's about collective bargaining and the government putting them in a position to not have to negotiate. So beyond NASA becoming now technically a spy agency, they're also making some changes to how they're going to work in space. We've always had the International Space Station, and we know that that project is coming to an end. We know that there's only so many years left in that. And so they have made some plans going forward. And I thought this was interesting. I wanted to share this with y'all. Let's take a look at what NASA plans to do going forward.
The International Space Station has been a central part of scientific research aimed at understanding the universe around us. But by the end of this decade, its time could be up.
Yes, space agencies are working on plans to send the ISS back to Earth's atmosphere in 2030, just 5 years from now. But what ends up replacing it is not exactly clear.
Is this kind of like a house here? Why is it nearing the end of its useful life?
Yeah, absolutely. What a monumental achievement. This thing has been in space for more than a quarter of a century. And space isn't like, building a house in like the desert or even Antarctica. This is the harshest environment possible. We face daily challenges to keep this station operating. And we've learned a lot about how to stay and live and work in space.
Bring it down. So how does that part work? I mean, does it crash into the ocean? What do you mean?
Yes. That's basically it, in a very controlled way. So starting in 2030, we will evacuate this space station. It's been continuously inhabited since 1998. So this will be the first time that there'll be nobody on board the space station. Then we'll let atmospheric drag naturally bring its orbit down over the course of a year and a half. And then we'll send up a specially modified rocket to attach to the station and give it one little nudge to send it on the exact precise trajectory to send it deeper into the Earth's atmosphere where most of it will burn up. And then anything that survives reentry will be targeted to a point in the Pacific Ocean called Point Nemo. It's the most remote location on Earth. It's also known as the space graveyard or rocket graveyard. This is where we ditch all the stuff. And now NASA is ready to move to the next edge, to move to the next frontier, to push us a little bit further, while still supporting commercial development of low Earth orbit. And there are many companies competing here, including Blue Origins, including Lockheed Martin. The leader here in this space is Axiom Space, a private company. They are developing a module that they plan to launch in 2027 to attach to the ISS. And this will be a full private module, and then they will detach and then add more modules to it, and it will be twice the size of our current space station.
And I heard NASA's even going to, there's a theory where maybe they rent basically space on it.
Exactly. That's the idea, where NASA becomes one of many customers and partners of a private space station, so that we can spend less public money on low Earth orbit, which is a problem that we've already gained a lot of experience in, and we can keep pushing forward.
I can't imagine, as bad as I hear rent is around major metropolis cities, I can't imagine how much it would cost to rent a space on the new space station. Probably pretty spendy, but pretty exciting stuff. So the space station, I wonder what that will look like from space. I wonder if we'll be able to observe that for a while. So he said it's going to circle for a year to 2 years, a year, I can't remember. And in that time, I can imagine there'll probably be some interesting, views from space to see. It's not a small thing, it's a huge thing. So all right, on to some cool news. I wanted to share this with everyone. One of my subscribers, Jeremy, he has been talking to me about possibly being able to go and record him as he uses a process to call up orbs. These are actual images that Jeremy sent me, and you can see there, this is something that he does frequently. He's doing more and more of right out by where he lives. These are orbs, and we're hearing about this more and more, that folks are having great success and being able to communicate with these things somehow, being able to call upon them, or at the very least, view them. They're letting themselves be known to certain individuals. And I think that is just fascinating. I think it must be fascinating for Jeremy. And I can't wait to see more, to learn more, and kind of see where that path goes. So Jeremy, thank you so much for sending in these images, sharing these with our subscriber group here. We really appreciate it. Yeah, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. That is quite stunning. You've got one very high up and far away. You can kind of tell, and it's hard to get good pictures at night. Like you would have to have a just stupid expensive camera for these to be much better than they are. I mean, these are great images for night images. So you've got it way up high, and then you can see a little bit of zoomed in there, and then there it is, incredibly zoomed in. I'm not sure if it came closer at that point, or if he was able to get kind of a successful zoom there. Let us know how you got that shot, Jeremy. But very fascinating, very, very cool. And if you have any photos, videos, anything you'd like to send in, stories, anything regarding this topic, send them in. Gabriel Speaks at proton.me. That is my email address. Again, that's Gabriel Speaks, just like the show, at proton.me. You can also find me on X. It's at @GSpeaksShow on X. Shoot me a request, follow me, shoot me a message, whatever's easiest for you, whatever you're comfortable with. Would love to get more images, pictures, and stories from our subscribers so that we can share those with everyone else and get the word out more. At the UAP hearing, we heard George Knapp get questioned about names. Do you have any names of older people that may have been involved with these legacy programs? In fact, the representative asked if anybody, not just Knapp, but anyone on the panel, including Dylan and Jeff, and nobody had a name. I mean, you could have heard a pin drop. Like I said at the time, it was so quiet in that room. And they had actually moved on to the next question. They had kind of given up on that question and moved on to the next question. And George Knapp interrupted them and said, I do have a name for you. And that name is Glen Gaffney. Glen Gaffney spent 31 years in the intelligence community. He was the director of science and technology for the Central Intelligence Agency. He was deputy director of national intelligence for collection. Now they say that's data collection, information collection, not UFO collection. That's what they tell us. Associate director of CIA for talent. So discovering people, finding folks you can trust in the CIA. Vice president and senior fellow of In-Q-Tel, which is a strategic investor in Ready Soon Technology. Ready Soon Technology is basically an idea, or Ready Soon Tech. It means near-term tech breakthroughs. So things that are going to happen soon, but haven't quite happened yet. And he's this chief strategy officer for the Noble Reach Foundation. Now, what do you all think? Do you all think someone like Glen Gaffney fits the profile of a legacy gatekeeper? Part of those old programs that we talked about, the Ros that we've talked about in the past, the Roswell recovery stuff. It's very interesting. Now, looking at Gaffney, he's now currently part of this foundation. He has done a few interviews, and I wanted to share just a little bit of one with you. Now, here he's talking about ethics. Now, they are the subject of conversation is AI, but I did find it interesting. I was able to find a segment on ethics. So let's watch this together. This is Glen Gaffney, and he is discussing AI ethics when it comes to innovation, breakthroughs, just kind of using it in general.
The ethical questions are legitimate here.
Yes.
I'm this may be trite, but there's certain decisions, back to the human in the loop, I only want someone who's sworn to the Constitution to make on behalf of our country, right?
Right.
You don't ever see that fully changing, do you? I mean, science fiction would maybe think otherwise, but
I don't see it changing. But I think this is...
got to be careful. It doesn't.
Well, and I think there's another set of steps that are required in terms of this ethics and guardrails discussion. Because one of the things that I'm concerned about is that there'll be mistakes made in the application of it, and then we're going to get knocked back, right? And
typical.
And go in, correct? Because what happens typically is somebody will make a mistake, and then we'll draw the policy line or the guideline 3 steps before that could ever happen again, and we start slowing things down. Right. Meanwhile, right, our near competitors are going to keep pushing forward and pushing forward.
That's a great point.
And so we have to be aggressive in developing and testing these models. And I think that one of the things that I call for regularly is I believe we need to establish proving grounds that are focused on key aspects of application. So AI in cybersecurity for critical infrastructure. and then begin to test a range of outcomes and include the social sciences and the public, right? The consumer is everyone who's affected by the decision that gets made. And so at what point is it acceptable to shut down some aspect of the power grid, as an example? And what elements of that power grid? And as a society, right, we will mature and embrace different levels of risk associated with the value and the risk and the associated risk, with those decision space. But that has to be tested. And in doing that, not only do we continue to move this forward, but we build a whole new level of trust with the public sector in the way that we're approaching using these things. And that's true whether you're a government, you're the government, or you are one of the companies that is developing AI solutions for application, right, broadly.
Okay, so what I heard there largely was we can't let AI guardrails stop innovation. So it sounds like he's for less, at least from that little sample, he's for less regulation, less guardrails when it comes to AI. I could see that being the mentality of a gentleman in one of these old legacy programs. Let's see what else he has to say.
To actually develop these kind of what I'll call open proving grounds, where government, industry, and the citizens, our citizens, all right, can engage. And I think that's it's not just that opportunity. It's an opportunity for trust building, all right, but it's also going to help move us forward as a society in critical application that will really stand. It'll separate us from the competition, let's put it that way.
Yeah. The intelligence community, they're estimators. They're not clairvoyants.
Hugely important.
Well said.
Hugely important point. And it's why I think the intelligence community should have an advantage. And it's not new for the intelligence community, as Teresa was saying, and you said earlier, we've been using machine learning and AI, right, and it grew out of our advanced modeling efforts for years.
Did that sound like him basically saying that intelligence has been using some type of AI for years and years? He doesn't put an exact date on it, doesn't say exactly what it was, but that's interesting considering a lot of the rumors that are going around. And this interview was a year ago, so this is before the UAP hearings. Let's let him go on here.
Questioning your sources all the time, right?
Absolutely. Let's get to the open source discussion. I mean, the reality is I'd say it's has its day in the sun, and some would say it should have had it a long time ago. But the reality is I don't think you can go into a compartmented discussion now and not have open source information drive a lot of that discussion. Am I wrong on that?
I don't know if you're wrong on that. I'm hoping you're not. I almost think a friend of mine, Bob Glykoff, talks about each of us having an AI recommender on our shoulder, right, for the tasks that we have to do and the things that we have to approach. And if we think about what that means for the analyst, whether they're an energy analyst or a treasury analyst, or right. The ability to see what's out there and make connections, discover patterns, alert those patterns to the critical eye and the critical thinker that can then evaluate those, that's gold. What I would have done I wish I had AI engines and advanced modeling techniques like we have today back 100 years ago when I was doing analysis anymore. These tools are out there, the data is out there. But what the intelligence community and the national security community have is years of experience in working through these knotty, difficult problems and applying some of these tools and techniques. And so the insight that's been gained through hard knocks and experiences behind the fence line can be shared outside the fence line without getting into the details of the problem that they were trying to solve or
a little sample of how this gentleman thinks. I don't know. I think that, to me, the thing that really stood out the most was the fact that Knapp waited, hesitated. In fact, Jeremy Corbell leaned forward, kind of like in a consultation, and said something to him, and then he came out and said that name. That's fascinating to me. So George Knapp had his UAP hearing, and in that UAP hearing, he mentioned Thread 3. Took some digging, but I was able to locate Thread 3. Now, it's important to note what I have is what's known as a mirror. So it's not the official document, which means it's probably been scanned, rescanned, but it is the document, Thread 3. Since Knapp said he would submit it to the Senate, to the UAP hearing for the record, I went ahead and looked it up, found it. I did find some interesting things. Now, some of the documentation or a lot of it is like them covering some stuff that we have covered. So for instance, it gets into Majestic 12, MJ 12, Maja 12, whatever you want to call it, but it doesn't actually provide anything new. It basically says, here's the story of Majestic 12. It gives details about it. It gives the same names that were in the original names of that document. Now, that document, the MJ12 document, that was submitted to the FBI for review. If you've done research in this field, you know that there's an MJ12 document that was submitted to the FBI for review. The FBI, every single page of the document, bogus. I mean, literally like across the whole page, big bold print with a Sharpie, bogus on every single page. So, of course, to someone like me, I'm thinking, well, then it's got to be legit, because there's no way they would write that on there unless they really didn't want people to think it was real. And maybe it's not 100% legitimate, but maybe there's a little bit of truth in there. They go through the memorandum of Majestic 12. They talk about how they're the group that kind of governs this information in the United States, and that it was established by Truman on September 24th, 1947. One of the things that spawned this was a object that had crashed about 75 miles to the northwest of Roswell, and that's where we get the Roswell story. What I hadn't heard or read about was that on November 5th, and this is according to the Thread 3 document, on November 5th, 1950, there was a second object that crashed to the ground at Al Indio Guerrera on the Texas-Mexico border. And there were specimens of the materials that were urgently conveyed to New Mexico. So they had specimens, they had materials. To avoid panic, they go back to the MJ12 story here, that the ultimate level of secrecy must be taken because of the level of panic that this could set. And in fact, it cannot be conveyed to the next administration that comes into office and going forward. So Jim Semivin recently tells us that executive branch has complete control over this UFO information, and that it's up to them what comes out. This Thread 3 document states that that is not the case, that since the initiation of this secret group that was started under Truman, because that's when the initial Roswell instance took place. And if you want to say in 38 in Italy, because it's believed there was a crash that we retrieved there, that was also under Truman. So you have both these crashes. These both happened under that president. He has to be read in, right? There's just no, he created it. But going forward, they don't read in presidents anymore. This is the highest level of secrecy, even higher than nuclear weaponry at the time and now. And so the president of the United States is not read into these things. According to this document, there were, according to this document, I don't know if I'm going to say according to this document every time, but according to this, there were 28 catastrophes. And this report, George Knapp smuggled this report back in the United States from Russia in the late 80s, early 90s. So at this time, what they had in this document is that 28 UFO crashes around the world. 12 of them had happened in the United States in particular. One object has fallen into the Pacific Ocean and fighters were disabled. During the Apollo program, it was ordered to clear out all pictures and data that would be identified with UFOs. So any Apollo program that went to the moon, anything that could be identified as strange or UFOs was basically scrubbed from all of those pictures and video that were taken. The document talks about rotary gravitation experiments. Talks about models for GI Shipov and AF Chevnov propelling agents able to move from the water across the air and then into space. And this is based on the physical vacuum. So these are very similar to things we've heard here as well, like trans-dimensional travel. The common assumptions in the paper as far as the science goes, there's a physical vacuum, is material space, wave gravitational processes connected with rotating masses. So there's possible negative weight at a critical rotation rate. And these are, I believe this is known as the Searle effect. And they look at the Searle effect very much like we kind of call anti-gravity here, right? Even though that's not the correct term, that's kind of how we refer to these things. Anti-gravitic or gravitational propulsion, something like that, right? They believe the Searle effect had it right, at least in these documents, the time that this was released. So that means for years before that as well. If you're a military personnel that wanted to come forward and talk about this, after being sworn to secrecy, you could face up to 10 years of imprisonment. That's a long time to go to jail for giving a reporter a statement on the record, right? Or giving someone, an author, a story on the record. 10 years, long time to serve just for sharing a story like that. So you can see how that would keep people from coming forward and sharing what they saw, at least folks in the military that may have seen these things while in the military. They provide somewhat of a mini timeline. So in June 21st, 47, there were 9 disc-shaped apparatuses. And this was an early wave that triggered wide reporting. September 24th of 47, Truman establishes the Majestic 12. Circa 47, there's reports of a crash 75 miles northwest of Roswell. September 51, the JANAP directive, there's a mandatory reporting, harsh penalties for leaks. That's what we just got done talking about, the 10 years possible imprisonment. July to August of 52, there's multiple reports of UFOs in Washington, D.C., and not just one or two, but multiple objects, up to 68 objects. And this happened on at least 7 different occasions. And as we know, the response to that was something to do with the weather. Yeah, the weather was acting weird, and it caused all these discs to show up over, some of them directly over the White House, but all over Washington, D.C. November 5th, 1950, there was a Texaco-Mexico border crash. So that's the one I was talking about, where they collected fragments and materials. 1972, NORAD red alert phone intercept. Fighters were disabled. Objects were down in the Pacific. And the president heard about this. And this was in 72. 1980, the string field tallied 28 crash events worldwide. So a lot of this, we've got crash materials, we've got recovery programs, we've got highest levels of secrecy, and we've got a lot of confirmation of this kind of the story we sort of thought we understood a little bit in the United States as far as what was going on with these legacy programs. Gets into an extra crash that I hadn't heard about in Texas in 1950, and it talks about another crash retrieval. There was a recovery, it appears there was a recovery in upstate New York. And in this recovery, it was said that there were basically truckloads of ice that were brought in to this recovery area for a reason they don't specify. However, you can look up additional details on this story on a Russian website if you have the translator app for websites, and you can find out that they actually assumed that it was bodies that they were pulling out, that they needed to keep those bodies on ice. One of the crazy things in the Thread 3 document was the story of a person named Melishev or Malishev. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Melshev, I don't know. But this was a young male experiencer. What happened with this male experiencer is they were taken aboard a disc by a human-looking figure. In fact, there were 3 human-looking figures, and they were wearing bright-colored suits that didn't even seem to look like they wrinkled, didn't have any buttons, or didn't have any discerning way of how you would put them on or off. They were communicating with the experiencer telepathically. And we know this because he said, they talked with him. This is a direct quote. They talked with me without opening their lips. In the modern Russian language, their voices were young. That was a direct quote. And he said the direction of the language, it was fixed in their head, and it didn't change no matter if they changed their position. So they could move around, but they would still hear that sound from what sounded like the same space in their head, which matches up with what a lot of telepathic experiencers will tell you. Took him on board, said everything was lit up, but he couldn't tell where the source of the lighting was coming from. There were rows of blinking instruments. They put on a headpiece on him, which felt like a crown. They used these detectors on his arms and his legs, and it was basically kind of like a quick medical readout. They told him that he had very strong nerves and that his mental faculties were below average. That's what they said. He said that they showed me an instrument which was like our TV set, and on it he saw a street in his neighborhood. He saw people and cats, and he saw them very close up. No real explanation for why those images were displayed or anything. They suggested him to try and visit their planet. He agreed. They said it will take 10 minutes to fly to our planet and the same to return. The distance is about 3 light years. So he goes on the visit. He sees rings of color shifts. The disc opens up into sections and it actually becomes like a cylinder and then back into a disc. What cylinder almost matches up with like a pill, right? So when they're traveling very quickly, when they're traveling very quickly, becomes like a cylinder, the shape of a cylinder or sausage. That's a direct quote. As they're traveling, the Earth recedes. They approach to the moon, and he sees hangar constructions on the moon. He describes their stations and then the flight as if behind the moon. So they travel. The Earth is getting farther away, sees the moon. He sees hangars on the moon, and they continue to travel far away. They get to this home planet. There's no sun. So the planet was lit up by a garland of highly situated bright lamps and also by some illumination from inside. Even white light. The air was clean, fresh as in a pine forest, easier to move than on Earth. So apparently maybe a low gravitational resistance or whatever. Ground covering was similar to concrete. And again, these are quotes that I'm reading. So if they sound broken up or whatever, that's because it's translated to English and they're speaking with the Russian dialect. So the people that were seen were wearing casual clothing like sport suits, white shirt. And he was accompanied by one individual the entire time. The entities were tall. They were youthful, wide set eyes with a bird-like look. They would seldom blink. They had headgear like a skull cap or a fore and aft cap. They wore bright, seamless suits and thick-soled shoes. And when he said when they looked at you, they knew even what you thought. They didn't laugh, but they liked good humor. Okay. One of the weirdest procedures was when he was first brought into the craft. One of these beings walked up to him with these large black gloves on. And this being was able to, with these gloves, reach directly into their chest and touched his heart. And then removed his hand. So with this glove was able to reach inside of this experiencer's chest, touch their heart, and then remove their hand. They also took a skin sample. I believe it was like a triangle type skin sample. And they said with that one small skin sample, they could make several human beings. Ugh. What does that mean? What does that mean? So some things to note. Some quotes to note. They talked with me without opening their lips. It will take 10 minutes to fly to our planet. The distance is about 3 light years. There were hangar constructions on the moon that they used as their stations, and the planet was lit by a garland of lamps and illumination from inside, whatever that means. So that's a first-person narrative of an experiencer from the Thread 3 document that George Knapp recently shared with the UAP hearing. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. And that's why I wanted to talk about Michael Battista as well. And we're going to get into that video here. I talked about a UFO landing. That's right. Magic Mike Batista came on the Ross Coulthart show and shared some video of what appears to be what he states is a UFO landing. Now, Mike Batista is a part of the Skywatch team, and he's been known in the psionics community for a while as being an individual that has the ability to communicate, somehow control whatever these UAP are. This video, Ross Coulthart shared while having Michael Battista on his show, he states is a UFO landing. And there's been some highly edited versions of this where you can see it even better, but I think this is a pretty good version. So we're going to take a look at a little bit of this interview with Coulthart and then this actual apparent UFO landing. Let's take a look.
Doing it. Went dormant for a year, completely strange. And then it was March 15th, 2021. It was like the day my life changed and will never be the same. I was at home. I was on the phone with a friend of mine. I was just in my backyard, just looking up. And I look up and there's this blue mist pretty high up in the sky, but not that high up, like not like a satellite. It was a blue mist and there was this transparent cube in the mist, which I snapped a picture of as well. And that was the start of this journey.
So just talk to that blue cube for a moment, Mike, and talk about it for me.
Yeah, so it was just hovering, just stationary in the sky, and it looked like the cube inside was transparent, and it was kind of moving like this, and then it just kind of drifted and faded away. And I was on the phone, so I was like, I told him exactly what was happening, and then I didn't think much of it. I just thought it was cool, until the next day, and then the next day and the next day, where I was consistently being visited by this phenomenon daily since then. And it was almost like they showed up and like, hey, we're not leaving. Like, we're here. Like, the faster you get over it, the faster we can get back to business type thing.
So when you say that there was that level of communication, that level of messaging, were you actually hearing a voice in your head? How was it communicating with you?
Well, that type of communication, had to be built over time. It didn't just come, the first time I saw one. It's like the responsiveness and asking for validation for certain things. It's almost like they teach you the language to communicate with them with. And, I'll like project a thought out, like in an attempt to communicate. And even now, like I'll feel like I'll get a response back in words, and not particularly my voice, but it's been validated when I get these confirmations. And even now, still, I struggle. Like, is that my imagination? Am I just making it up? Or, but when they show up, when they do what you're asking them to do and inviting them to do, there's your validation for that.
So when did the landing incident occur?
Well, there were several of those. The one they're revealing today, that occurred in April of 2023.
So talk me through how that came about. What was happening? Why do you think that this alleged landing of what I say this with a laugh because it is just such confronting imagery, what we're about to show the public. It is extraordinary. How did this happen?
Well, this is after a year and change of just being outside every night, like interacting with the phenomenon and building that relationship, but still not understanding my purpose in this or why they're visiting me, almost like loitering. And I want to say harassing, but they're like, hey, we're getting his attention by any means. So, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, why is this happening to me? Like, what do you want? You guys are showing up every day. We're doing this. Like, you come in close, but for what purpose? Like, if you're this hyper intelligent species, this non-human intelligence, that's way far more advanced than us, then just land. I was like, do it. Like, are you too scared to land? I was almost antagonizing, the connection in my mind. And because I was frustrated, I didn't know why this was happening. And, I didn't think they were going to do it, and they called my bluff, apparently.
So the Green Beret called their bluff, and they called your bluff because they did. What happened? Talk me through what happened.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the sky, and very clear night. And after expressing this frustration, I see something very high up in the sky, like you see like a satellite or something, but it was blue, and it was going by overhead, and it ejected something out of the back of it. And it had its own like light source, almost looked like a shooting star got ejected out of the bottom of an orb.
Mike, at this stage, you're holding your phone up, a cell phone, and you're filming what you're seeing, correct?
Yeah, I believe that was shot on a Galaxy.
Okay. What did they say to you about your dog? Tell me that story.
So, again, it was like infant stage of NHI communication. And, I asked them to land, and then I instantly got this thought response back in my brain saying, we'll land, but only if you put your dog away in the crate. And I was like, oh, that's a strange request, because I usually my dog has seen more aliens than anybody. Okay, he's always with.
So if you want me to put my dog away, that means you're worried about my dog. Why are you worried about my dog? Are you going to try something? My dog going to have to defend me from something? So why would they request that, first off? And then second, would you obey that? Tell me in the comments if NHI said, we'll show you, we'll come land, but you got to put old Skipper back in his kennel. Let me know in the comments if you would do it.
Always with me. And, but he's Belgian Shepherd, Belgian Malinois, Dutch Shepherd mix. And, he's...
Oh, they're a very big, fierce dog. They're used by a lot of people in special forces, but they're
Absolutely.
A terrifying animal, aren't they? They're a very fierce
Absolutely.
dog.
So I was like, all right, sorry, dude, you have to sit this one out, so I brought him back outside, and then that's when something ejected out of the bottom, and then you could see it slowly, coming down until it just started to get closer and closer. And then, once it got in proximity of me within 100 feet, as it was closing in, it did something to me that affected me physiologically in a way that almost made me docile or compliant, which I thought was strange. Almost like not a dreamlike state or a trance, but like it was way too casual for me at the time to be seeing that happen.
Well, you're about to have a close encounters of the fifth kind. You're about to meet, allegedly, something non-human. I would be pretty excited and possibly a little bit scared. I can hear your respiration on the video. You're breathing far more quickly than normal, I think.
Trank dart?
Right.
What
and
the fuck?
So when it was coming down and it finally hits the ground, I'm standing there and I'm looking at it. I'm like, what is that? I didn't have a frame of reference, because I hadn't seen something like that yet. So I'm staring it down and it's staring me down. And then there's also a chicken nearby and we're all staring each other down. And it almost looked as surprised to see me as I was to it. So
now, Mike, in that freeze and zoom, you see it looks like some kind of translucent white-blue face, but it's not a human face. It's two black dots for eyes. That looks like a sort of a dot for the mouth, and it's a long ovaloid head.
Is it on the ground or still in the air at this point? I can't see the video.
I think it's still in the air at this point. It seems to be metamorphosizing out of nothing.
Right. So as it was coming down, it looked like ethereal, like if they're interdimensional, maybe it was, still materializing in the third dimension. And as it got closer, I remember it started morphing like this and pulled one of these, and it was shape shifting into all these different, things. I don't know what they were. You have to take a closer look at it until it turned into something that you would see on a petroglyph, right?
I want to stop you there for a moment. It looks almost like it's got wings. You see the head, and then you see bluey white protuberances out to each side?
It came down as it looked like a cube with something sticking out the top, and then it started morphing into certain things. Then it turned into something you see on a petroglyph. And then after that, I saw a humanoid looking form of it. And he was like wearing a skin tight metallic purple suit, greenish, grayish, bluish skin. You know, it was nighttime in the camera. And then after that, that's when it appeared as what you're talking about. And in the video, like when I was seeing it in person for the first time, I was like, oh, that kind of looked like an angel to me, because it kind of had like the wings like this and like a light emanating at the top, like a halo. But as it got closer, it wasn't that, you know, stereotypical, you know, image of an angel you get, you know, when you think of the Bible. It was a solid craft that was lit up in that way.
At this point, is whatever the object is, entity, object, whatever you want to call it, is it telepathically communicating with you?
So at this point, I was in that docile mind frame, and I don't think that it was. I think it was induced almost, because like once it actually hit the ground and I saw how big it was no bigger than 3.5 feet, and it probably didn't want me to come closer. Like Ross, if something landed right here next to me now, I'd probably be more inclined to walk up to it and see what that's about. But that wasn't the thing.
Wait, okay. So I was joking, but they did. So he's basically implying they made him docile. They made him whatever, like hit him with a digital, you know, an Air Xanax or whatever.
And the fact that I was even able to reach for my phone, I was fighting it. And some of those shots are very shaky. I actually had reached for both phones, and I was trying to see which one looked better, but it wasn't. It was. Got
two phones. One for the UFOs.
It was just so surreal that it's hard to describe and replicate unless you know you're in that position.
Some kind of what looks like a being. It's got an ovoid head, small eyes, a mouth. What would it be?
And it had like a football head.
Do you think it would be fair to say that it looks like an insect?
Well,
like a praying mantis?
I saw a lot of things that night. You know, the photo I think you're talking about, if you see the purple, if that's the one, that to me looked like a gray because it was so small. But as the experience progressed, it started to, I saw more than one entity that night, you know, and I did see something that looked like an insect for sure, like a praying mantis.
I'm watching this on real time, and you need to go frame by frame, but what you can see is it kind of moves between looking like an insect, like with that ovaloid football-shaped head, and then it's like the classic grey head, like the Whitley Strieber communion book with the round bulbous head.
I don't know if I saw angels and wings and all that. Did y'all see that? I mean, it does look crazy. Don't get me wrong. It does look crazy. But to say that's an angel with wings, or a praying mantis, or a gray alien, like it could be all those things, I think that's almost, you know, kind of like projection or conjecture.
Because you see what looked like wings coming out from the side of it. It's quite extraordinary.
I didn't see any wings, did you?
Because you see the Strieber communion book with the round.
Yeah, I don't know about. I mean, right here, this guy looks more like a little ghosty on the top, like the two eyes, and then like the ghost spot. I don't know.
Bulbous head.
I'm not seeing, even as they go through it frame by frame. Let me know what you think down in the comments, because I don't know, y'all. I'm not sure if I'm seeing that in there, but there is something there, right? He did say he wanted these things to show themselves, and he did say that he was practically like daring them or whatever to come down. And looks like they did. And whatever that is, it is something, right? Like that's what's interesting to me. I don't see a praying mantis. I don't see a gray. I don't see an angel with wings, but I do see something very strange. And that to me is what's fascinating. I don't know what it is, but it's something, right? And that's that's pretty crazy. Also, I didn't make up, just to be clear here, I didn't make up Magic Mike Battista. That was the actual name that they put in the notes. Magic Mike Battista. I don't know where that nickname comes from, but I think that's pretty funny. The UFO UAP hearing stuff that George Knapp shared, you know, they don't get much into this new stuff, the psionic stuff and what Skywatch is doing. I know James Fowler left Skywatch, and it will be interesting to see what direction they take now. But yeah, Mr. Batista is an employee there, it appears, and that is a pretty amazing interaction that he recorded. What it is, again, I don't know, but it is definitely something. And I think that's something that would have certainly kind of rocked my world. And for him, it sounds like he's got more video ready to go, because when that interview starts, he's like, yeah, the one we're looking at today is this. And so it sounds like we may be seeing some more stuff from Mr. Batista. I certainly hope so, because again, I'm not shitting on what it is. I'm simply saying I don't think we can draw a conclusion as to what that is, but it is something, and it is very fascinating, and it definitely, if that's legitimate, it absolutely deserves more study. So the one thing the Thread 3 documents do talk about is the transdimensional stuff. And John Lear recently gave an interview. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Gaia or whatever, but they do once in a while have on a good guest, like my friend Eric Hecker, and occasionally they get it right. So this interview they had on John Lear, and I think this is really interesting because John Lear, after all of his years of research and analysis and contacts and everything else, he comes up with some actual locations on the Atlantic where he believes there's, I'm not kidding you, friends, actual UFO like entries to bases. Now, I haven't watched this yet, so we're watching this for the first time together. I had to share this because this is in the United States on the East Coast. You could go and check out one of these sites right now and see if you notice anything strange.
In Monterey Bay, there's a canyon that's deep enough that they can take a nuke sub, go under and enter the Pacific Ocean that's under those 7 western states. And they can go anywhere they want, and all that has to happen on the surface, they dig down whatever the length of the plate is. In the case of Hawthorne, it's 3,400 feet. Sandpoint, it's a little more. Lake Tahoe, you remember when Jacques Cousteau did the deep dive at Lake Tahoe?
Yes.
And when he came up, they said, "What'd you see?" He said, "I can't tell you. The public doesn't need to know about that." Like that. So that tipped us off. And then one thing led to another, and we found out, yes, there is a huge, they built an elevator that goes down. And the reason they did was because the firm that makes all the highly classified weaponage for the U.S. nuclear subs is in that mountain just to the northwest of Hawthorne. They dug a large hole there, 3,400 feet deep, to the Pacific Ocean, and they have a huge underground base. And all I have to do is take this weapon and put it on the elevator and send it down there.
And they got it.
And the goes out the Monterey Bay. But it's just outside Fort Ord, and there's always something there because there's a gigantic UFO base outside of Fort Ord.
Right.
This is the Monterey Bay entrance, and at Moss Landing, and it's the Elkhorn Slough that you can look under when you go on Google Earth and find out that, look at that canyon.
Yeah, that angle,
there.
right.
And this is the Malibu one. That's also on the net. Great pictures.
That's a great picture that they took of that. And they still haven't covered it up, I don't think.
No. You don't have to cover up something that nobody believes. So this is Hawthorne, and that's the route that they take direct to Hawthorne, and that's where they get all their super weapon stuff. This is Lake Tahoe, and that's Pyramid Lake.
Pyramid Lake.
There's something at Winnemucca. There's always been something at Winnemucca, and I don't know what it is, but there's always been some kind of classified facility there. This one is Lake Mead. You know, Nellis used to be called the Navy Lake Mead Station.
Underground bases, we've heard about them on the West Coast, running under some of the super classified, highly secured facilities under New Mexico. Now, apparently, we've had them going on for quite some time in the East Coast, large enough to transport submarines hundreds of miles and armaments and whatnot. So fascinating stuff. So we've heard about the missing almost $22 trillion from Catherine Austin Fitts during the Bush administration, and how she was told essentially to just forget about it. And it's $22 trillion with a T, and that was in the 90s. You think about that amount of money. And her theory was a lot of that was used to build this underground system of bases, railways, tunnels. And we're discovering we've always had tunnels or that we've known of out on the West Coast and New Mexico area, California areas. It's always been rumored, especially in those highly secretive bases where they have a lot of tests going on with some of our new highly classified aircraft, and even confirmed and factual in some instances where there's underground bases and railways there, so or tunnels connecting them. So we know that's a thing, and seeing that it's also happening on the East Coast out there, wow. Catherine Austin Fitts may have been onto something here. And, you know, these bases, these things could be all over the country, underneath all of our feet, and we might not even know it. Right, y'all? So we've got Skunkworks with a new killer drone that can be added on to jet fighters. We've got NASA being designated as a spy agency, but remember, that's more for financial reasons than anything else. Just Google NASA spy collective bargaining agreement, and you'll see what I mean. I promise. It's worth the read if you're curious about it, or you think all of a sudden NASA's going to start spying on people. Michael Battista, fascinating video. I don't know what to make of it. Again, I could not make out like a being or a face or a mantis or whatever else Ross Coulthart was saying. I think he said an angel. I didn't see all that, but I did see something, some type of activity that happened directly after he made this request, I guess telepathically with whatever these entities are. I wouldn't put my dog away, but maybe that's why he's Magic Mike and I'm Gabriel Speaks. I'm not putting my dog away. I'm not doing that. So that's very interesting. We had one of our subscribers, Jeremy, share some amazing pictures of an orb. Hope we get to see more of those. NASA's going to be leasing space in their new International Space Station after the previous International Space Station crashes to the Earth. Glen Gaffney is apparently a known participated in the Legacy UFO programs that we've been talking about forever, not just on this show, but in ufology in general. You could say Glen Gaffney is almost the smoking man on X-Files, is what may be the case. Very fascinating, and his take on ethics was very interesting. Just sounds like somebody that might be willing to be a part of a program like that, right? You get to be on the cutting edge of technology, and that's where he's been his entire career, and that's where he is now. I'd love to have Glen on. Glen, if you want to come on, talk about it. I'm sure you can't talk about it, and you'd probably just have to deny it, because we know what all that entails. And until, if and when we get some kind of confirmation of immunity for these legacy folks, I just don't think we're going to hear anything from them. And then we have to talk about, is the cost of amnesty worth it for the truth? And will the truth be what we think, or will it be completely different? You know, it's easier to swallow if the truth is what we want to hear. But if the truth isn't what we want to hear, and then we've granted all these people amnesty, what are we granting amnesty to exactly? So these are things to think about before signing off on something. Sometimes you just can't cross that line to get to what you believe is truth of a story, because you're giving up something in doing so. Don't give up your own integrity and your own character to get the truth about somebody else's lies. I want to know what you all think. Should we consider amnesty for legacy program folks that were involved in these legacy programs? Should we consider giving them amnesty so that we can hear the truth about what happened after Roswell? How did they actually keep this a secret? Did they really break this up and spread it out to all these private companies like we're being told? And if so, is the government going to have to worry about getting sued now because they may have given some companies technology in an unfair advantage that they didn't give to other companies in the same field or in the same sector? And that's what Hal Puthoff was talking about on Rogan. When you add up the pluses and minuses about disclosure, when they were looking at it back then, it always came out a net negative. So disclosure may be something that we've had as much as we're going to get. And as far as getting anything on the record from these legacy folks, like that's just not going to happen, because they're concerned for themselves and their families and their livelihood. I get it. We can barely protect the whistleblowers we have, for crying out loud. The whistleblowers that we have, they come to Congress and there's literally no organization. There's no laid out plan from A to Z, how you're going to get there, the steps we're going to take, what we're going to do to make sure you're safe, what we're going to do to make sure your family is safe, and make sure that you're able to provide for your family still and provide us this information. And are you going to be protected? Do we need to provide some kind of security detail? Do we need to put you in some kind of program where we hide your identity because what you're going to be telling us is going to make a lot of people angry? None of that is there. It's basically come forward and we'll see what happens. That's not going to, if I'm a whistleblower, that's not going to get me in the room, is come in and see what happens. So it's something we got to address. It's stuff these are all things we need to take a look at. We need to take a look at them soon before this really starts getting away from us. All right, y'all, that's all we got for this episode. Thank you again for tuning in. I'm glad to see you back. Don't forget, leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think about all this stuff. What do you think about Glen Gaffney? What do you think about NASA collective bargaining agreement basically being stomped out by this executive order? What do you think of the alien landing by Magic Mike? That recording, pretty crazy stuff, right? Would love to know your thoughts. And again, if you have any stuff you want to share, it's Gabriel Speaks, I can't talk, at proton.me. That's Gabriel Speaks at proton.me. Or you can get me on X at GSpeaksShow. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone, and I'll see you next time.